And we're going to look at verse 8. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 8. This is if this verse isn't marked in your Bible, please do so.
I love this verse.
Yes, we should all know it. It says, the grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of our God stands forever. A verse we should all remember. And Isaiah, we've all heard of Isaiah. I personally consider him the greatest prophet. There are others that disagree with me and think that Elijah was, whatever. But Isaiah was prophesying during this time that we're studying about. So he was just prophesying. When he started prophesying, actually around 739, all 12 tribes still existed. Now they were separated. There was the north and the south, but we still had all 12 tribes. A few years later, 10 of the tribes were captured. And so for the majority of his prophesying, Isaiah was only prophesying to the south, to the 2 tribes that were left. Yet his faith and his optimism never wavered. He still kept his faith. So keep that verse in mind, because it talks about a true and faithful servant. Now let's go to Psalm 119. Psalm 119. And we're going to look at the 5th verse, I think, or 5th stanza. Stanzas, 8 verses. And this is the one that's headed He, H-E. And I looked through all my Bibles and I found no variations of that spelling anywhere. So He, and here the psalmist is focusing on his longing to be in the Word. His longing to be in the Word. This particular stanza is also the first stanza that uses all 8 of those key words that we learned, that we talked about at the beginning. So all 8 of those key words show up in these 8 verses. It says, teach me, Lord, the way of your statutes, and I shall keep it to the end. Give me understanding, and I shall keep your law. Indeed, I shall observe it with my whole heart. Make me walk in the path of your commandments, for I delight in it. Incline my heart to your testimonies, and not to covetousness. Turn away my eyes from looking at worthless things, and revive me in your way. Establish your word to your servant who is devoted to fearing you. Turn away my reproach, which I dread, for your judgments are good. Behold, I long for your precepts. Revive me in your righteousness. So he is searching and asking the Lord to help keep him in the Word. Something we all need to do. Okay. Now, after the marvelous lessons we had on passing the mantle, we're now going to go to chapter 3 of 2 Kings. Chapter 3 of 2 Kings. And today's lesson is going to be primarily a history lesson. Things we've studied in the past, and we're just going to review them to get them fresh in our minds. Let's look at the first 9 verses, the first 9 verses of chapter 3. The first 9 verses of chapter 3. Deborah, do you have your Bible handy, please?
Yes, I do, Marlene.
Would you read chapter 3, verses 1 through 9?
Certainly. This is an NIV translation. Joram, son of Ahab, became king of Israel in Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and he reigned 12 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father and mother had done. He got rid of the sacred stone of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. Now Mesha, king of Moab, raised sheep, and he had to supply the king of Israel with 100,000 lambs and with the wool of 100,000 rams. But after Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So at that time, King Joram set out from Samaria and mobilized all Israel. He also sent a message to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. The king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? I will go with you, he replied. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. But what route shall we attack? He asked. Through the desert of Edom, he answered. So the king of Israel set out with the king of Judah and the king of Edom. After a roundabout march of 7 days, the army had no more water for themselves or for the animals that were with them.
Thank you. Okay, we've talked about a lot of people here, so let's go back and look at this. Jehoram, the son of Ahab, if you look at your kings of the north, Jehoram or Joram is the way some Bibles have it, and you'll see that he reigned for 11 years, from 852 to 841. Now, he did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and mother. Who was his mother?
Jezebel.
Jezebel. For he put away the sacred pillar that his father had made, but he still kept sinning.
I want to make one note. I muted a bunch of people because we were getting feedback when Deborah was talking. So if you try to dish out the answer like Deborah, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you, Pam. Okay, thank you. So we are now in the time of Jehoram or Joram. Some Bibles spell it Joram. Okay. He is still a bad king. He's still an evil king. Maybe he did away with some of those false altars and things, but he still sinned. Remember, his father Ahab has died, but Jezebel is still alive and well. And we'll find she's still exerting influence. Okay? So we have this character. Now we also have Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah. And if you look at your kings of the south, you'll see Jehoshaphat reigned from 873 to 848. So this period, since he's mixed, according to this, with Jehoram, is late in the reign of Jehoshaphat and during the beginning of Jehoram's reign. Okay? And the two of them get together and decide that they're going to invade Moab because, number one, they don't like that Misha, who was the king of Moab, okay, also a sheep herder, stops paying ransom. That's what he's going to do. He's going to stop paying ransom. So they decide, these two kings decide that they're going to get the king of Edom to join them, and they're going to invade Moab. All right. These three kings are going to invade Moab. I want to point out, because this is going to come along later, he's going to get involved. On your map of the 12 tribes, if you look at it, go way up to the left, to the right at the top, and you'll see Arama, and above that, Damascus. Arama, that is the old name for Syria. That's the old biblical word for Syria. We know the country as Syria. Okay? Some Bibles have translated it Syria. Others use the old name. Okay? Drop down to the bottom of your sheet. It's still on the right-hand side. And by the letter F, if you go across, this is Moab. That's Moab. That's the area they're going to be invading. Okay? Above Moab, below Moab, go straight down from Moab and you'll see Edom. And that's the country that the two kings, the kings of the north and the south, have asked to work with them. They've asked this king of Edom. Okay? Now, I give you that bit of background because we're going to go into this a little bit more. You've heard me mention, and people say Moab and Edom came along. These countries, well, let's start with Edom. The country of Edom existed for many years. The Bible gives credit to Esau as being the head of Edom. Okay? Who was Esau?
Jacob's brother.
Jacob's brother. I'm not going to take time to read it because I don't have time to get through all of it. But in Genesis chapter 25, verses 24 and 26, that's the description of Esau being born, with Jacob coming out second. Esau and Jacob were twins. Okay? Esau was first. Jacob was second. That's important to remember because Esau, as the firstborn, normally would have had the birthright and special inheritance privileges. And if you remember back when we were in Genesis, we talked about this. They got usually a double portion and became head of the family and all that. Okay, that was Esau's birthright. But Jacob later obtained the birthright from Esau. Anybody remember how he got it?
He put on a furry skin and acted like he was his brother. And then they had the stew and
The soup.
Yeah, by trickery. He got it by trickery. Okay. And that was part of it. And then, with Rebecca's help, the mother of the twins, who should have been neutral, right, treated him the same, but she helped him to get what Deborah was just talking about, the blessing that was Esau's. Okay. Esau was not happy about that and left. Okay. And he did sell part of his birthright because he came in, remember, and was hungry for stew. Now, Esau was called Edom, and Edom means red. Okay, so he was red when he was born. His skin was probably red. And therefore, all of Esau's descendants became Edomites. Okay, he moved to the hill country of Seir, which we looked at down here. And Genesis 36:9 explicitly calls Esau the father of the Edomites. Okay. Now, we do need to know that before Esau's descendants arrived, there were people living in that area. They were called Horites. Okay. And in fact, Genesis 36 lists them, some of their kings and their descendants. But Esau and his descendants became dominant and the controlling party or race, whatever you want to call it, in Edom. Okay. Genesis does give us a list of some of the kings that existed before they came. Okay. During the time of Ahab, not much earlier, that we're talking about, there in First Kings, it specifically says there was no king in Edom. This is in First Kings 22:47. So during the time of King Ahab, the horrible king of the north, the Edom had no king. And if you'll notice, as I said earlier, when we read this Bible passage, it did not name the king of Edom. It just says there was a king of Edom, and they asked the king of Edom. Okay. The two countries are going to battle. Here we've got the north and the south and Moab battling Edom. Okay. Battling Edom. Edom and Israel are brother nations. Edom, because Esau was born an Israelite. And even though he left and started Edom, or became ruler of Edom, he was still an Israelite. Therefore, when Israel here is going after Edom, that's a brother nation going after a brother nation. You'll follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we don't tend to think of it that way, but that's what it was. That's what it was when they went after. And Israel and Moab, really, it was a civil war when you think that they were going after family. Okay. And by the way, there's a stele, Mesha stele. You'll notice that Mesha is mentioned in verse 4. Yeah, Mesha, the king of Moab, was a sheep herder. There is a stone tablet called the Mesha stele, and it provides, it's still in existence, they still have it. It provides the account of the struggle between Moab and Israel and Edom. So that's outside confirmation. Okay? So that's how the biblical Edom came into existence. And it's still, as I said, I want to stress, this was brother nation against brother nation, even though we don't think of it that way very often. Now let's look at Moab. Moab, which was also the part of these particular verses. And Mesha, the king of Moab, says, I'm not going to pay the ransom anymore. I'm not going to pay anymore. And then they get together, the king of the north, the king of the south, and the king of Moab, and they're going to go against Edom. Now, let's look at how Moab got started. And here we're going to do some reading. Let's go to Genesis. The first place, let's go to Genesis, and we're going to go to chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12. And we're going to look at verses 1 through 6. Now, we are going back here. I'm going way, way back, because this is going to start, if you'll notice, the first line says, now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house. Okay? Abram, of course, is the original spelling and name of the man we know as Abraham. And he's up with his father in his father's country, and God comes to him. Okay. This is an easy way to remember. We'll start with Abraham. He was alive around 2000 BC. If you remember Abraham, 2000 BC. Okay. Moses, 1500 BC. David, 1000 BC. And we're now in the 800 BC, where this is what the chapter that we're studying in Kings is in the 800s BC. But in the early stages, the main leaders that the Bible really stresses, come approximately 500 years apart. Okay, so starting with Abraham. So this is around the year, Marilyn.
Say Abraham and Moses' time frame again.
Abraham, just say 2000 BC.
Okay.
And Moses, 1500 BC.
Okay.
And then David, 500 BC.
Yes.
Okay. And that'll give you, without having the exact dates, you'll have that timeline. Okay. Now, God has come to Abram, as he's called then, in Genesis 12, 1 through 6. So we're at 2000 BC, roughly 2000 BC. Okay. And would somebody please read Genesis 12, verses 1 through 6?
I will.
Thank you.
Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's sons Lot and all of the possessions that they had gathered and the persons whom they had acquired in Haran, and they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. When they had come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At the time, the Canaanites were in the land. And then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he moved on to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and invoked the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on by the stages toward the Negeb.
Thank you. Lot. In these verses, they tell us that Lot is Abraham's nephew. Lot is Abraham's nephew. It says, it doesn't use the word nephew in my Bible in verse 5. Abraham took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son. That makes him Abraham's nephew. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Keeping that in mind, let's look at chapter 13, Genesis, chapter 13. And we're going to read, this is a rather long passage, but it's about when Abram and Lot separate. They have gotten to the area where they're supposed to go, and well, I'll let the chapter explain it. Chapter 13. Could I have a volunteer to read that, please?
I will.
Thank you, Marilyn.
And then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all he had, and Lot with him to the south. Abraham was very rich in livestock, in silver and gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, and to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abraham called on the name of the Lord. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, and they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and dwelt in the land. So Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go toward Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Is that where do you want me to stop?
No, go all the way through chapter 13, please.
Oh, okay. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants could also be numbered. Arise and walk in the land through its length and its width, for I will give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord.
Okay, thank you. Okay, they had to separate because they had too much wealth to continue to grow into the same area. Okay, they were still related. They were still uncle and nephew. And keep that in mind, because just because you separate and go your separate ways, that doesn't change the fact that they were still related. All right. Now, let's look at chapter 14. Chapter 14, and we're going to read verses 11 through 16. Now, these 3 verses of chapter 14 is the story of a war between a group of kings. And it was taking place down in the valley where Lot is living. And so verses now, chapter 14, 11 through 16 is where, and I'll just go ahead and read it. Then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Then one who escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Aramite brother of Eshcol and the brother of Aner, and they were allies with Abram. Now, when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by might, and he and his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. So he brought back all the goods, and he also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and men. Okay, so Lot has been captured, and Abram, this is why I pointed out where Damascus is. Abram went all the way up there to try to save him and recapture him and bring him back to safety. So it's obvious that Abram or Abraham valued him as a member of the family. After all, he was his brother's son. Okay. Now, let's go to verse 19. Verse 19, chapter 19, I'm sorry. Chapter 19, long chapter, but we're going to read the whole thing. He is back. When I say he, Lot is now back in the plain where Sodom and Gomorrah are. This is a story we all know well. Lot is back there. Abraham has saved him and brought him back from Damascus where he was taken. So he and his family are now back on the plains in Sodom. So would somebody read, please volunteer to read verses 1 through 11. This is where the angels come to Lot in Sodom and talk to him.
I can read that.
Thank you.
The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. He said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night, and wash your feet, then you can rise early and go on your way." They said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly. So they turned aside to him and entered his house, and he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, and all the people to the last man, surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them." Lot went out of the door to the men, shut the door after him, and said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." But they replied, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came here as an alien, and he would play the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Then they pressed hard against the man Lot, and came near to the door to break it down. But the men inside reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the door of the house, both small and great, so that they were unable to find the door.
Okay, thank you. Now, Lot did not act very well in that he offered his daughters to save himself or save his household. But they broke in and they stayed there. These were evil men. And they struck, they were at the doorway. It's in verse 11. They struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary to trying to find the door. This is God at work. Okay? This is God working, creating the blindness, therefore. Symbolic blindness. Okay? Lot now is going to flee from Sodom. And we have verses there 12 through 22. 12 through 22. And if somebody would read those verses, please.
I can continue if you want.
Thank you.
Then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here? Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place. For we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or else you will be consumed in the punishment of the city." But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and left him outside the city. When they had brought them outside, they said, "Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, or else you will be consumed." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords, your servant has found favor with you, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot flee to the hills, for fear the disaster will overtake me and I die. Look, that city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved?" He said to him, "Very well, I grant you this favor too, and I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I can do nothing until you arrive there." Therefore, the city was called Zor.
Thank you. The next verses, we all know the story. Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. Okay? We know that Lot's wife looked back and what became a pillar of salt on the plains. We've all heard that story. So I'm not going to read those particular verses because I want to get this all in today. I'm going to jump to verse 27. And this is where verses 27 through 29, Abraham comes back into the story. It says, Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Then he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land, which went up like the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow. When he overthrew the cities Lot had dwelt in. Okay. Due to Abraham, because of Abraham, God saved Lot. God saved Lot. It tells us that. He sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow. And it was because of Abraham. Then we have the verses 30 through the end of the chapter. Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountains, and his 2 daughters were with him, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar. And he and his 2 daughters dwelt in a cave. Now the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is no man on the earth to come into us, as is the custom of the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. It happened on the next day that the firstborn said to the younger, Indeed, I lay with my father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight also, and you go in, and he with him, that we may and lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father. Then they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The first bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. And the younger, she also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ammi. He is the people of Ammon to this day. Okay? The reason we've gone through all of that, because we've talked about these countries over here, the reason we've gone through and repeated all of that story, the Moabites and the Ammonites, since Lot was Abraham's nephew, Abraham's children or descendants would be cousins, right, of Lot. And through all generations, they would have been and remained cousins. So here, when we go on and look at this in Kings, where the Moabites are the king of the north, the king of the south, and the Moabites get band together and are to attack Edom. It's family fighting family. Even though they were from different countries, okay, at the time. They all descended from the same area and time and relation. So the Moabites were also related to Abram. Very distant cousins, to the 5,000th or whatever, or maybe 500,000, but they were relatives attacking relatives. It wasn't just tribe against tribe, it was family against family. And it wasn't just at that time, there were problems between the Israelites and the Moabites. It continued on. In fact, in Judges, there's the passage in chapter 3, verses 12 through 30, I think it is, where there is a big fight with the Moabites. It was an ongoing thing. So the reason I took all that time and we went through all that is we need to remember, and I can't stress it enough, it wasn't just tribe against tribe, it also became family member against family member. Even though they were generations apart, they were still families. I kept thinking of our Civil War. In our Civil War, we had that. It wasn't just the North versus the South. There were actual families that split, and some were on the North and some were on the South. And that's what happened there. I'd like to give you just a little bit more of a picture. Are there any comments before I go on? Okay. This is just some commentary that I pulled up. It says that the Bible gives the picture in 2 Kings 3. Misha had been paying tribute to Israel. That's what we read. But after the death of King Ahab, he rebelled. Okay. Misha, king of Moab, was a sheep herder, and he used to pay the king of Israel the wool of 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams. That's a lot of money to pay, or goods to pay, when you think 100,000. So in verse 4 of chapter 3, Misha wants to gain more territory. Okay. If you look at the map of the 12 tribes again, it's at the strongest point. Moab occupied much of the mountainous region from the Dead Sea to places around Dibon, Medeba, Carrick, and Balmeon. Those are all places in Reuben. So they were a fairly large tribe at that time, or had a large amount of land, because they were actually occupying part of Reuben's. Okay. When we say large, the commentary said, think of it as a modern county. Think of it as Dallas County, for example. That was about the size of Moab. Okay. So it was roughly 60 miles to the south and 25 miles east and west, or at its largest extent, it was approximately 1,500 square miles. Dallas is bigger than that. Okay. When it was weaker, it controlled a lot less land. Okay. So its borders moved from time to time, depending on whether it was weak or strong. At this point in time, where in chapter 3, it is at one of its stronger points, because it has the nerve, or the gall, if you want to look at it, to refuse to pay any more ransom. Okay. And it's perfectly willing, even though it's family, to go against Edom, to join the others and go against Edom. All right. Now we have about I show about 5 minutes left. So I don't want to go any further because it's going to switch gears a little bit. But what I want you to take away from today is that much of the story that we will be studying was family against family. It was not just tribe against tribe. Okay. In many cases, it was a more intimate group. Abraham did his best to save Lot. to help Lot. And in the end, Lot, well, was his own worst enemy, is probably the best way to put it, and had to depart because of things he said and did. But that war, and we're going to be reading more, of course, about it now as the country splits up more and more and more. And the northern tribes cease to exist. It was family that was most important and suffered the most. Okay. Any other comments? And we'll pick up then with verse 10 and go on next week. Now, I've asked Barbara, and I see she's joined us. I'm glad your car is running, Barbara. You're on mute, Barbara, and working okay. I had asked Barbara to send or to repeat the prayer that she used last week, because I don't know about you, I couldn't hear most of it last week. I was having sound problems, but what I could hear, I really liked. And so I asked her if she would repeat it. If you'll take yourself off mute, Barbara, would you close us with your prayer again, please?
I hit the wrong side. Okay, got it. Okay. Well, you know, when we studied the mantle, we're talking about passing on the authority and all that kind of thing. And this fits kind of right in with that scenario. Title of the poem is Pass It On. It only takes a spark to get a fire going, and soon all around can warm up in its glowing. That's how it is with God's love once you've experienced it. You spread his love to everyone. You want to pass it on. What a wondrous time is spring when all the trees are budding. The birds begin to sing. The flowers start their blooming. That's how it is with God's love. Once you've experienced it, you want to sing. It's fresh like spring. You want to pass it on. I wish for you, my friend, this happiness that I have found. You can depend on him. It matters not where you're bound. I'll shout it from the mountaintop. I want my world to know. The Lord of life has come to me. I want to pass it on. I'll shout it from the mountaintop. I want my world to know. The Lord of love has come to me. I want to pass it on. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome.
May
You're-
everyone have a blessed week. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Marley.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good week.